here we are again. This is part 5 of our discussion about A360 and the National Performance Goals. Got it right this time. I've been practicing for a while. We welcome everybody here. I'm glad to have you, and I'd love to say hello to our panelists today, which are two of the greatest experts that I know in these new standards, as much as you can be at this point, and that's Dr. Edwin Lofton, who you've seen on pretty much every one of these videos, and Sue McLaughlin, my partner at MSL, who's been on a lot of them as well. So this is part 5 of the discussion of really the new process, right? And the national performance goals in particular. When we put this together, we started this schedule with a little bit of a shallow dive into the new standards and an understanding of what we thought was going to be the proper sequence of discussion items. What we found, and I'll let you guys really get into the details of this, is that the physical environment really isn't highlighted in the national performance goals. Is that a fair statement for you guys?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're gonna keep talking about this. There are some elements, and we'll get to that as we go. But we wanted to really kind of hone in today on the physical environment. But in doing that, what we found was there's, like in every other area of the new standards, there's crossover from the physical environment into the clinical world and backwards, and which in my mind is probably a really good thing. But it's going to create some challenges for folks. Not really challenges, but it's a change in direction in how they've been doing things for a long time. So again, we're happy to have everybody here. I want to remind everybody, if you're an RN member, you can get your CECs if you apply for them at the end of this. So I always forget till the very last second to say that. So I'm trying to get that out of the way early today. So Sue, I want to kind of start with you because you're obviously the physical environment expert at MSL and have been heavily involved in understanding these standards and the previous standards and the standards even before those standards, and going back a ways like I have as well. So in a way, it's almost feels a little bit full circle, but I want to talk a little bit about the physical environment module, and just kind of ask you, tell me, is it new? And two, what are the major features, I guess, or components of the physical environment module?
Okay, thanks, Steve. First of all, I personally, and speaking for probably a lot of us at MSL, most of us at MSL, have had my head in these new standards for more than a month now. And I have to say that every time I read through them, I pick up something a little bit different. And so it's not always black and white, but there's something to learn from going through and spending some time with these. The first thing I'll say is, as we said originally, that everything that we have been doing in the environment of care chapter and the life safety chapter in the past years still is applicable. We have to keep doing everything that we're doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's nothing that we can tell that has really gone away. Now, having said that, one place that I think needs some attention is the issue of the management plans, the annual evaluations of those management plans, and the Environment of Care Committee, as it's been called. While there are no specific standards that require any of those things at this point in time, but when you go to the survey activity guide in the hospital document review list, it says at the beginning that the surveyor will want to have available the management plans, the annual evaluations, and at least 12 months of your committee minutes. So that alone. Now, we all know that surveyors have not been looking aggressively at management plans for a number of years, but they're still required to have them. And by that line, or those couple of sentences at the beginning of the document review list that we need to have those available. I think we need to pay attention to that. Can I tell you 100% that they're going to read all the management plans? Of course not. But they do require them being there. And from the perspective of patient safety and a good, solid program that grows and changes with the organization, that's multidisciplinary and all of this, I think it is absolutely the best practice to keep up with those plans, those annual evaluations, and definitely the EOC minutes, because or PE minutes, whatever they're going to be called now. But I think you do need to have them, because that solidifies your program. It pulls it together. It keeps you on track to take care of the important things that you need to be doing in terms of compliance for patient safety. And so it's a small note. We don't know how in depth it's going to be looked at, but please keep doing them. I think it's so important to keep your program strong in your organization. So that's one of the kind of unsaid things, but we think that it's still important.
Well, certainly the management plans and the annual evaluations have value well beyond just the accreditation process, right? I mean, one of the things that
Absolutely.
we've seen, as a best practice is organizations taking, a multidisciplinary approach to doing the annual evaluations of not just the plans, but the whole programs on an annual basis, and using that as the launch point for deciding what are going to be the initiatives, performance improvement initiatives, or where, identifying, we talk about it in one of the systems that we work with here. We do a SWOT analysis every year as we go through to do the annual evaluation. So what's working, what's not working, what do we do, what can we do better next year? What should we focus on? So there's that element, but there's also, I hate to bring this up, but I always seem to is, in a worst case scenario, a litigation situation, or even not even that, but when there's an issue that arises and there's question as to whether the organization did everything in their power to mitigate the risk, that those evaluations, those minutes, those management plans, and all of that evidence that shows the ongoing overwatch of these things becomes really critical.
And Steve and Sue, to your points, this is a excellent point where there's not verbatim language, but this is where PE module does relate to the NPG module, because again, leadership owns and is responsible for the outcomes and the plans. So when we're talking about physical environment, emergency management plans, evaluations, how is the governing body evaluating the effectiveness? And Steve, to your point, whether it's using a SWOT analysis or a performance improvement module, DMAIC, or whatever it is, this is where that language in NPG does overshadow PE and all other modules.
Right.
Great.
And when I go in to do a mock survey, looking at the management plans and the annual evaluations and the committee minutes, you can tell a whole lot about an organization's program and how well it's put together and how well it's working. And so it's kind of like your summary documents of everything that you've been doing to keep your program on track.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sets a tone for a survey if it's, the good documentation that tells a good story and illustrates the importance the organization places on the physical environment and making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do and it's safe. I think ever since the management plans, which have been a while, man, it's been around a long time now.
Forever.
Since they started, that's been one of the things I think has been most beneficial about them is helping tell the story of the organization early on to anybody who comes in as an AHJ. So, the reality is the physical environment module is not, the original description I think that I heard was, well, they eliminated life safety, they combined environment and care and emergency management into one. and that's really not true exactly, is it?
No, not at all. Um, First of all, emergency management is its own separate chapter, so that's really an aside
Yeah.
for this morning. We're not going to be talking about that today, but yeah, I wanted to go on with a couple of other things, and the eliminating life safety. Yes and no. They eliminated the chapter, but they did not eliminate all the requirements. The interesting thing about that, though, is that in within the PE chapter, the Life Safety Code has one standard, and that is PE 030101 EP3. It says you comply with the Life Safety Code. So that is really one standard that is going to get every life safety deficiency book um, cited at that one standard. So, my prediction is that's going to be the number one standard in the top 10 forever and ever, because everybody has some life safety findings. So everything there is going to go under that one standard. Now, for medical equipment and utilities, likewise, a lot of that falls under the NFPA 99 standard, which is PE 040101 EP1. So again, that's going to be a frequently cited standard for those areas. And so while the number of standards has been greatly reduced, as the Joint Commission says, that's true, but they've got everything, many, many standards lumped under those two standards for NFPA 101 and NFPA 99. So that's something to just keep in mind there too. There's going to be a lot of scores in one or two places.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons that's going to be challenging for people is the Joint Commission in the past was more prescriptive with life safety, and I think what that did was it unintentionally restricted what the surveyors actually looked for relative to life safety code compliance, because there were items in the life safety code and in the NFPA 99 and some of the other NFPA editions that we can talk about later that were not specifically spelled out in an element of performance and a standard in the life safety chapter or EC or any of the others. And so by doing this, what they've done is they've opened up the playbook, if you will, to all of those things that are actually have always been required, but were difficult sometimes for people to pick up on because they weren't in the chapter. So it's I think the challenge for those that are out there, the facility managers of the world, and are going to be, I need to have a deeper understanding of NFPA 101. I need to have a deeper understanding of NFPA 99, 25, 13, 72.
Right. Well, one thing I'll say about that is, first of all, I think it's well known that Joint Commission made these changes, particularly to the physical environment, but I'm sure across the board, to comply with the CMS conditions of participation. So
Right.
that's what you see here. And that's why you have, the one standard that fits all. The other thing that I want to say about that, though, is, a lot of people have been worried that with the specific language going away for the life safety requirements, where it says, you must do A, B, C, D, and E in the standards book, then I think the way to look at it now, people have been worried about training. And what I would highly recommend is, at the end of the year, don't throw away your 2025 standards. I think as long as we're in the same edition of the Life Safety Code, that the 2025 standards are what you use for training, where it goes into the minutia and tells you what you need to do and how often you need to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's one way to deal with that. and have a resource to train new people coming into your organization.
Yeah,
So
that's a kind of I'm sorry. Go ahead, Edwin.
no, I was going to say, Sue, I'm going to sound like a broken record. When we talk about training and the effectiveness of training, again, this is where NPG has an overlap because there's very specific guidelines in NPG or standards in NPG that how effective training is done is evaluated using a PI model. So again, especially in emergency management, in training, in planning, not only that you do it, but how do you measure its effectiveness?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, Sue, your comment about not throwing away the old standards. I think particularly the ECO 20305 standards, which had
Exactly.
a really good outline, but still there were things in there that were kind of missing from requirements for fire alarm, fire suppression, and other items that needed to be tested. So, you know, but it's a great starting point. And if you've got your documents organized that way, what I'm telling people is don't change your organization just yet. If it works for you, you're able to follow through and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you can identify gaps that may arise and all that. And just don't change it because you'll be able to take it and articulate it to a surveyor, and that's all that really matters.
I agree with you. The only thing I'm suggesting potentially to change is instead of using, EC 020305 EP3, put the topic that's covered
Yeah.
on your tabs so that you can find it by topic, not by the current standard in EP. And that would be the only thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about security management because that's changed too, right?
Well, security management has almost totally moved to the National Performance Goals chapter. It's found at NPG 11.01.0.1 or 110101, and that that piece will give you most of what you need in security management. I mean, the first standard in the physical environment says something about managing safety and security, but it doesn't go into the kinds of things that we've had before about security management.
And that's an interesting shift. I suspect that's again to try to make things a little more in alignment with the COPs, and because COPs don't really talk, I don't think specifically about security management, at least not in the way the Joint Commission did in previous editions of the standards. Um, so anyway, it's good. Yeah. At first glance, you might think, well, gee, it's missing. It's gone. We don't have to worry about it
Yeah,
anymore. But that's not true.
not so true.
So, in fact, that's again, if you're doing it, if it made sense last year, it makes sense to do it this year and going forward too. It's just how you discuss it and where it ultimately might get cited, if it even gets cited. But if it were a good idea before, it's a good idea going forward. Um, so, what other? Related to the physical environment, what else is a part of that now?
So there are a few things. While most of the physical environment is, as Sue was saying, is environment of care, life safety, and other items, there are a few standards and EPs from the 2025 standards from other chapters that have been brought in. We've already mentioned from an NPG standpoint some PI components, but very specifically, there are a couple of IC infection control standards that have been, or NEPs, that have been adopted into PE. When they use the term, this was interesting, when they use the term hazardous materials in PE, it is no longer just the chemicals and the environmental solutions that you use. They're also including hazardous medications. So from IC to MM to leadership, there are a spattering, to use a fancy scientific term, of EPs throughout PE that you need to pay attention to. And I've said this before in several of our webinars, but this again references very strong the ownership of leadership in looking at the outcomes, specifically related to PE 040101 EP4, and that the hospital maintains equipment and supplies appropriate for types of nuclear medicine services. And they get into detail and they bring in the LD standards, that is the leadership's accountability for nuclear medicine services. And they get into some of the other ancillary services as well. So as your organization evaluates the A360 standards, really look and see where that linkage and tie-in is, especially of infection control, because equipment and environment has to be involving infection control properties and principles, how it brings in leadership and those other components of care.
From the outside looking into this, I mean, and maybe I'm overstating this, but it almost feels like these things have been organized in such a way to sort of force the interaction between these players that traditionally may not have interacted at the level that we had hoped, like infection control with the medical equipment folks and leadership relative to hazardous materials and hazardous medications, and just people who manage hazardous materials and hazardous medications, because there's always not always, but a lot of times there's been a separation between those two programs and organizations, because pharmacy managed obviously medications, and someone a lot of times environmental services, but not always, was managing the hazardous materials piece. And then the nuclear medicine piece kind of fell into a weird realm. So it's almost like they're trying to create this environment for that crossover. I mean, is that making sense? So
absolutely. Sue and I were actually preparing over the weekend, and she and I recognized Sue looking at it from her physical environment perspective, in that tunnel look, me from a clinical nursing perspective, that tunnel look. We're both right, but we got to remove the tunnels to see the big picture. And Steve, I think you summed it up very, very well. Throughout the entire new A360, when you take that 30,000 foot look at it, what they're wanting to do, which is what CMS has pushed forever, is we are in this for safe patient care, not for the good of facilities, not for the good of nursing or medical staff, but our focus has to be on the clinical and safe environment services that each hospital provides.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the NFPA standards, Sue, and what sort of standards that are just called out in one particular standard element of performance that might, the hospitals or folks listening today that are attending or might watch this video, after we post it, that they may not see every day, that they ought to be aware of.
Well, I'm thinking, in terms of what's getting scored under that standard, it's, it is obviously all of the life safety code requirements that one might find on a building tour. And I think everybody that's walked with a surveyor probably is well aware of what they're looking for on that. It also may include EC 020305, which is the maintenance, testing, and inspection of the features of fire protection. And there is, some discrepancy about that. Edwin, you might want to talk a little bit about it. In looking at the Joint Commission crosswalk, we have some things in looking at that we are really questioning, and we're working to find the answers with Joint Commission involvement to try and see where that goes. But that is one of the ones that the ECO 20305 stuff that's a little bit fuzzy.
Again, I think you're right on, Sue. One of the things that MSL has discovered as we've been doing the deep dive into A360, that we've got some questions too. We don't have the golden answer for everybody, so there's going to be some clarifications over time. And as the Joint Commission rolls out the actual surveys, I'm sure there's going to be some questions that come up, and Joint Commission will do their due diligence and make sure the right clarifications are provided.
Yeah. Well, traditionally, and I've been guilty of this where I've told clients to just look, grab the NFPA 101, read chapters 18, 19, and scan 20 and 21, which for those of you that may not know what those are, that's new and existing healthcare occupancies, aka hospitals, and new and existing ambulatory care centers. But with this new focus on, and we're still don't know how they're going to do all this, go to all these other buildings, you probably need to know a little bit more about business occupancies, particularly in some of the other chapters. And we'll certainly be providing some education as it is appropriate around those things to kind of give you a heads up of what to look for. The good news is with business occupancies is certainly less than what you would have in a healthcare occupancy, but there are some differences. So those are the things that come to mind right away. But then, of course, NFPA 99 opens up a whole lot of opportunities as well from an electrical safety standpoint and a gas standpoint. And there's a whole lot of information in there. And of course, the documents that don't get a lot of traditional attention, like your NFPA 241, fire protection during construction, which is, a broad document, covers more than just healthcare, but certainly has an impact on healthcare. There's a lot out there that is going to be potentially scoreable.
And I think, though, the important thing to keep in mind with that is, without itemizing everything that they're going to be looking at, the surveyors are kind of facing the same issues probably as the folks who are managing in a hospital facility, because there is other stuff in the life safety code in NFPA 99 that under these new standards could be surveyable. Will they look further at all the details that we haven't been covering all along? Possible, but it's going to be tough on them too to recall and to learn, all of this, as well as it is on all of us and you in the facilities.
Yeah.
So I think that's a question mark as to how far they're going to look at those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's I just had a thought. I don't know if I should articulate this or not, but how I've been saying for a long time. And when we go out, we do our surveys with our clients. If we see something that we think is an issue, let's get that into the Spotlight, which is our software tool that we use to gather information. And then Spotlight will tell us, is there a code or standard associated with it? And if not, it becomes, hey, we think this is still an issue you ought to address, even though it's not specific to a code or standard. Maybe that's part of what the Joint Commission's motivation is here, to just say, hey, we want you to go pick up on as much as, we don't want to restrict you to what was in the life safety chapter. We want to just say, go out and find things that need to be improved. And, because there was a whole lot of stuff in the 101 and the 99 and that weren't specifically called out in the previous versions of the standards. So, any other thoughts about the physical environment module? Got to keep working on that language we want to address today.
I think just, again, encourage everybody to read the A360 standards, and especially the PE module, and MSL is here to help you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we're coming up on the 30 minutes. So again, we're trying to keep these things short for everybody. But we look forward, we're going to be doing another one. We're actually, like I said, during our last video 2 weeks ago, that we're going to be wedging in some more physics, easy for me to say, specific to the physical environment. Say that 3 times fast. In addition to what we've been talking about with the national performance goals and just the A360 sessions in general. We really appreciate it. We've had a lot of response and attendance to these things. And so we definitely want to keep that going. And we appreciate all the great comments we've gotten from people. So we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. The videos are going to be available as they have been on our website. So, if you're just tuning in for the first time, that seems so weird to say, but if this is your first one and you want to get caught up, you can go back to the website and watch all those. And again, if you're one of our Accreditation Readiness Network members, let us know so you can get your CEC. So with that, I'll say thank you to Sue and Edwin, and thank you to those that attended, and have a great day, and we'll talk soon.